WADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar, 1 p.m. in Abuja. Good afternoon, and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and worldwide on WADR.org. Welcome to Newslink. First, our top stories. The deputies in Senegal's National Assembly summoned to vote on a proposed amnesty law. The Timbuktu Institute describes Niger's withdrawal from the multinational joint task force as a setback in regional security.
MNJTF has been crucial in coordinating military operations against Boko Haram and the Islamic State in West Africa. Niger's withdrawal clearly weakens the collective response, as it has been a key contributor to border security and intelligence sharing within that group.
Ghana's President Mahama warns of heavy sanctions, including demolition of buildings in waterways ahead of the rainy season.
Let me be clear, this must stop. Those structures will be pulled down. We will not allow a few selfish individuals to endanger the lives and livelihoods of countless others.
And the Ivorian government lowers the prices of petroleum products for the month of April 2025. Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
Here is Abdullahi Hassan with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining our midday broadcast and welcome to our listeners within and beyond the sub-region. Let's begin in Senegal as members of parliament ready for a Wednesday vote on the controversial amnesty law passed by the immediate past administration of President Macky Sall in 2024. The deputies summoned to the March 2nd plenary session will vote on the proposed law interpreting the amnesty law, which covers all facts related to the deadly political protests from 2021 to 2024. From a promise by the government to repeal this law to an interpretation, regardless of the outcome, the victims and their families only ask that justice be done. Augustine Coley tells us more.
On the eve of the examination of the amnesty law in Parliament, the collective of victims and families of victims of the deadly political demonstrations in Senegal reminds the deputies of the unique opportunity they have to bring justice to the victims. Abdoulaye Wadr is the president of the collective.
When the hypocritical lawmakers passed this unjust law, it was only to conceal their crimes. Before rushing into power, they promised to repeal these laws. Yet they have repeatedly attempted to push them through. Now they seek to silence us. We are waiting for the law to be voted on so that justice may be served. There have already been complaints filed with the prosecutors. We hope these cases will be reopened. The judicial authorities must expedite these proceedings. We have been waiting for nearly 3 years for action. Now we have the opportunity to bring justice to the victims' grieving families. We urge the deputies to take notice of this matter, and so we await the next steps.
From the repeal of the amnesty law, it is a bill on its interpretation which will be examined this Wednesday by the deputies. It aims to fight against impunity and ensure that all perpetrators of serious crimes, executors of especially sponsors who recruited, armed and financed the talks and other private militias during the deadly political demonstrations of 2021 to 2024 are held accountable for their actions, said Amadou Ba, MP from the ruling Pastef party, author of the proposed law. As a reminder, at least 65 people, mostly young people, were killed during the protests called by the opposition. According to the same report drawn up by a collective of journalists, cartographers and scientists, many young people were also injured or detained.
A report filed by Augustine Coley. And to the Sahel, it is worth noting that civil society organizations, movements, and security institutions have warned against Niger's withdrawal from the multinational joint task force, otherwise known as MNJTF. The Timbuktu Institute is one of those organizations alarmed by the development, describing it as fatal and catastrophic in the face of growing regional security threats. The Institute reminded us that Niamey's decision is coming just days after it suffered a heavy terrorist attack that resulted in dozens of civilian casualties in the Tillabéri region. Babakar Njai, a senior researcher at the Timbuktu Institute, speaks to WADR about the likely implications of Niger's withdrawal from the Joint Task Force.
It's very sad for us who are militant and supporters of collective security for West Africa and integration and development, because it is a significant setback for regional counter-terrorism efforts, number one, because MNJTF has been crucial in coordinating military operations against Boko Haram and Islamic State in West Africa. Niger's withdrawal clearly, no doubt about it, weakens the collective response, as it has been a key contributor to border security and intelligence sharing within that group.
Stay tuned as Babakar Njai joins us with more analysis in the second half of the news. Meanwhile, Togo's parliament has passed a bill to strengthen national security. Adopted last Friday during an extraordinary session by the MPs, the law should make it possible to strengthen intelligence gathering, especially in areas affected by insecurity. Through this text, Lomé also wants to prevent certain conflicts which could influence radicalism amongst its population. And in Nigeria, Major Hamza Mustafa, retired and former chief security officer to the late head of state, General Sani Abacha, has called for urgent action against those responsible for the killing of 16 traveling hunters at Uromi in Edo State, south of the country. WA's Usman Omar reports.
The gruesome murder of 16 hunters of northern Nigerian origin who were traveling through Uromi in Edo State, south Nigeria, has sparked widespread condemnations, with Major Hamza Al-Mustafa, retired, demanding swift measures to bring the perpetrators to justice.
We hereby call on the federal government, the state government, Nigeria police, the SSS, and indeed the military, those who have roles to play in the internal security of Edo State, to be on their feet first, to fetch the perpetrators and bring them to book in the open clear war. Second is to call on the federal government and indeed National Security Council to have a review on the depth of hate and mutual suspicion that so many actors have embedded into the minds of people, especially in the uncalled for divide between religions, tribes, and then North and South dichotomy.
His call comes as Edo State Governor Monday Okpebolo paid a condolence visit to the families of the victims, assuring them that his administration will ensure justice is served.
I come down from Abuja today because of you people, because you are my brothers, I'm also your brother. Let me say, Allah Yakau, Allah Yaduka, Bakaba. So let us take things easy. We will reason together. We'll go inside palace now and discuss with leaders so that after we can address you people.
The governor also traveled to Kano State, where he met with Governor Abba Kabir Yusuf to express his condolences over the tragic incident. During the meeting, Governor Okpebolo disclosed that 14 suspects have been arrested in connection with the killings. He further reveals that the head of the Edo State Vigilante Corps has been suspended as part of broader efforts to ensure accountability. In compliance with the directive of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, authorities have promised that more actions will follow in their bid to restore public confidence and uphold the rule of law. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
As a reminder, we are live on YouTube and Facebook. Ahead of the rainy season in Ghana, President John Dramani Mahama has issued a stern warning to persons who have built in waterways that their structures will be pulled down. The president lamented how so far, with a few instances of rainfalls, some parts of the country have experienced floods, and how that situation cannot be allowed to continue, especially as the main rainy season approaches. Speaking during the commemoration of the Muslim Eid al-Fitr celebration in Ghana on Monday, Mahama described the situation as a reckless disregard for planning regulations.
I must address a deeply troubling issue: the illegal construction of buildings in waterways, causing flooding and extensive destruction of property. As we know, the rains are about to start, and already we can see flooding because people have built and blocked the rivers, and so the rivers have nowhere to go but to back up. This reckless disregard for planning regulations and environmental safety is a major contributor to the devastating floods that continue to plague our communities. I'm aware of instances where private businesses, colluding with some chiefs, are turning water retention areas, Ramsar sites, into built-up zones. Let me be clear, this must stop. Those structures will be pulled down. We will not allow a few selfish individuals to endanger the lives and livelihoods of countless others. The law will be enforced, and those who flout it will face the consequences.
Ghana's President John Dramani Mahama speaking there. Meanwhile, it is estimated that close to 2,000 Ghanaians die annually from colorectal cancer. Additionally, records show that there are between 3,000 and 4,000 new cases of the disease annually. This, according to a professor of surgery at the University of Ghana Medical School, Professor Jonathan Dakubo, is unacceptable since it is preventable through treatment. He also indicated that poor diet, lack of physical activity, and substance abuse form some of the major risk factors for the disease. He therefore urged Ghanaians to adopt healthy lifestyles to reduce the burden of the disease. According to the World Health Organization, WHO, colorectal cancer is the third most common cancer worldwide, accounting for an estimated 10% of all cancer cases. It is also the second leading cause of cancer-related deaths globally, predominantly affecting older individuals, with the majority of cases occurring in people aged 50 and above. Let's take you now to Liberia, where the Executive Director of Namut Partners for Development, Eddie Jaolo, has called for a comprehensive review of the country's 1986 constitution, arguing that it has not been adequately revised for over 40 years. He asserted that the outdated constitution has been detrimental to the rule of law, governance, and democracy in the country. WADR's Moreover correspondent Abraham Parker reports.
The leading CSO boss stressed that such a process is essential to reinforce governance, uphold democratic principles, and ensure that the rule of law is both clearly defined and consistently applied. He questioned what has replaced the foundational 1847 independent area constitution, noting that the lack of necessary reforms has weakened legal provisions that protect civil liabilities, promote judiciary independence, and guide against the political will of governance structures.
The Liberia Constitution must reflect modern democratic standards and provide a stronger legal foundation for justice, accountability, and inclusive governance. The 1986 Constitution, which last amended by a military regime in 1986, no longer fully addressed the country involving political, social, and legal reality.
Jawolo identified several key areas within the governance structure that require urgent constitutional review. He highlighted the need for rule of law and judiciary reform, proposing the establishment of a special law court, including an electoral code and correctional court, to ensure justice and accountability.
We also recommended an electoral reform process, strengthening electoral system to ensure transparency, credibility, and public confidence in the electoral system. Women political participation, institutionalizing legal measures to promote gender equality in leadership and governance.
Eli Jawolo also wants all stakeholders to engage in this vital process, advocating for a constitution that reflects the aspirations and rights of all Liberians. For Newslink on WADR, this is Abraham Parker from Monrovia.
In neighboring Côte d'Ivoire, there is still no official report on the damage caused by a fire on Sunday at the autonomous port of San Pedro. It is through this port, located in the southwest of the country, that a large part of Ivorian cocoa is being exported. The warehouses of this port also store many goods, including cotton intended for export to Europe. Christopher Ticho tells us more.
A 4,000-meter square warehouse containing 3,000 tons of cotton from the Malian textiles company caught fire. Africa Global Logistics is responsible for storing cotton from the Malian textiles company in Côte d'Ivoire in its warehouse at the port of the San Pedro before exporting it to Europe. Africa Global Logistics acts as a freight forwarder for CMDT. The fire that ravaged the warehouse was spotted early Sunday morning, according to eyewitness, with with no further details on its origin. Firefighters dispatched to the scene were able to bring the flames under control by Sunday evening. The fire burned a large part of the cotton stored in the warehouse. The company in charge of operating the warehouse was nevertheless able to save a large part of the goods, which were evacuated to other sites. Officials continue to assess the extent of the damage and the financial loss caused by the fire. Losses could amount to several billions CFA francs. Before this fire, other convoys of cotton from the Malian Textiles Company were on their way to San Pedro to be stored and then exported to Europe. For the time being, the CMDT has not yet communicated on this incident.
A report by Christopher Aticho. Still in Côte d'Ivoire, the government has lowered the prices of petroleum products. This means that the prices for the month of April 2025 will see a slight decrease. This announcement was made by the Ministry of Mines, Petroleum and Energy in a consultative note published on Monday, March 31, 2025. This rate will remain in effect throughout the country until April 30, with a litre of petrol dropping by 20 CFA francs from 875 CFA francs to 855 CFA francs, while diesel will fall by 15 CFA francs from 715 to 700 CFA francs. However, prices for butane gas remain unchanged, at a 6 kg bottle still costing 2,000 CFA francs and a 12.5 kg bottle costing 5,200 CFA francs. You are listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM Dakar, Senegal. We are live on WADR.org. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Deputies in Senegal's National Assembly summoned to vote on a proposed amnesty law. The Timbuktu Institute describes Niger's withdrawal from the multinational joint task force as a setback in regional security. Ghana's President John Mahama warns of heavy sanctions, including demolition of buildings in waterways ahead of the rainy season. The Ivorian government lowers the prices of petroleum products for the month of April 2025. Still ahead in the news, we have the press review, guest interview, and sports news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Many thanks for staying with us. More on trade, which takes us now to Togo. The government has suspended the export of shea nuts and almonds. This is a stopgap measure intended to help the situation of insufficient production of shea nuts and almonds and the need to meet the demand of the population, particularly from local companies that process them.
This is the newspaper review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the newspaper review.
The newspaper review.
Today's press review takes us to Monrovia, Liberia's capital, for developing and trending stories on the front pages of the dailies. And we have Abraham Parker with those details.
We begin with the newspaper with this first story. Eugene Nangwe on EPS director's back claims he is incompetent and unprofessional. Eugene Nangwe is the chief of staff for former Liberian President George Weah. Boost for Liberia's revenue energy management, expert hails National Identification Registry project. The next stop is the Inquirer newspaper. Who is stealing whose vision? And this one centers around the former Liberian maritime boss Eugene Nangwe. He has alleged that the current Liberian president is stealing the vision of former Liberian President George Weah. Central Bank of Liberia launches spies on Liberia's economic transformation. Our next stop is Daily Observer newspaper. Liberia People Party splits over Gonglo Ware's endorsement. National Executive Committee rejects Barriers his sister. Liberia Telecommunication Authority eyes AI, rural telecom expansion, and global partnerships. Religious leaders urged lawmakers to respect the rule of law as the nation anticipates Supreme Court verdict. And Liberia's constitution needs urgent reform, Nemo urges Bwakai. And our last stop is front page Africa News paper with this first headline: Divisive political movement. Mixed reactions greet VP Kun's endorsement of Koga in Nima by-election. The Nima County by-election is up and political endorsements are ongoing. Deeply political division. Ex-President Weah's office refused allegations of withholding presidential vehicle, accuses the Unity Party government of taking undue credits. Misleading and diabolical. Liberia Council of Churches denounces fake statement circulating on social media. Well, that does it for today's edition of Press Review. For Liberia's capital, it's back to you in studio. Thanks for listening.
Many thanks, Abraham Parker.
Politics,
Analysis on major news,
social matters, and all. This is The Guest.
Joining us on the guest segment is Babakar Njai, a senior fellow and researcher at the Timbuktu Institute. Njai, who had earlier described Niger's withdrawal from the Multinational Joint Task Force, or MNJTF, as a major setback in the regional security framework, explains some motivating factors behind such a decision. MNJTF is a security platform comprising Nigeria, Cameroon, Chad, and Benin as an observer to fight against insurgency, trafficking of weapons, and increase border patrols. Our guest fears that the gains made could be reversed, further impacting human security.
My guess is this may stem from, first of all, the political tension that is continuing between Niger and ECOWAS since the 2023 military coup, right? And also, secondly, probably shifting alliances, as Niger depends security ties with Russia through the Wagner, they call now the Africa Corps, but it's the same. And therefore distancing itself from Western-backed initiatives. And probably you may have also domestic priorities, I think. Because recently you see attacks on a very important economic asset, which is this pipeline, right? And they may have concern about now securing the pipeline. This shows clearly when we say peace is essential for development, it's lack of peace and security in the sub-region that undermines this major economic initiative, which is this gasoline pipeline that will allow Niger to develop its economic energy independence, right? Because of insecurity, you may be withdrawing your troops that was necessary for your national territory now to protect your economic assets, which are also what they call the security referent, because it's a target and it needs to be protected. They may be overstretched, but you weaken one front to strengthen one front, you leave a gap. I think those are maybe the justification. Now, in terms of the consequence, repercussions will be great and numerous and very dangerous because this withdrawal will likely exacerbate human security challenges. First of all, you may have increased terrorist activity, no doubt, because reduced coordination could allow Boko Haram and ISWAP to exploit gaps in border security and leading to more attacks on civilians. That's number one. As a result, you may have displacements and humanitarian crisis because escalating violence may force people to flee. It's obvious, and worsening the already severe refugee situation in the Lake Chad basin. You may have also economic strain because cross-border trade, critical for livelihoods, could decline due to heightened insecurity. And number three, that will be the last, the weakening trust in regional cooperation because other MNTJF members may question also the force and effectiveness and potentially leading to further fragmentation. Those are the key human security challenges I'd see directly from this withdrawal.
Are we likely to see a shift in terrorism in the region, given that Niger is a critical and key player of the MNJTF and it's withdrawing its membership, meaning pulling away its contributions in terms of material, logistics, and human support?
Very much so, in my view. This may lead to, first of all, rebalancing of terrorist groups, because Boko Haram and ISWAP could redirect attacks towards Niger itself, because you have a loophole. Because if Niger reduces counterterrorism pressure while exploiting also weaker points in Cameroon and Niger, because when Niger leaves, it will leave a gap for weakness and vulnerability for Cameroon and Niger. And therefore, you may have an expansion of other jihadist groups. If the MNJTF weakens, groups like Jnim and Al-Qaeda affiliate in the Sahel could also expand into the Lake Chad, because they opportunistic groups who use vulnerabilities of the stronger force. Then that will clearly open a gap for vulnerability. And then you may also have increased reliance on external actors, because if Niger may depend on Russia mercenaries and Wagner, and MNTJF members turn to Western support, that would be leading also competing security frameworks. You see, it will be very risky now. And Africa is a target of other powers also because of the resources that we have. I think regional bodies like AU should encourage Niger to reconsider or at least maintain intelligence sharing with the group.
Babakar Njai is Senior Fellow and Researcher at the Timbuktu Institute. And in the world of sports, Burkina Faso got their CAF Under-17 Africa Cup of Nations off to a positive start on Monday after a hard-fought 2-1 win over Cameroon in the opening match of Group B in Morocco. Our sports anchor Sankule Jako is in the studio with me for more details. Sankule.
Yes, of course, you're right. The Burkina Faso were 2-1 winners. Against Cameroon in a very interesting, thrilling encounter on Monday, of course, in Morocco as the Under-17 Africa Cup of Nations kick-start of recently. Of course, we've also seen some very interesting results because Zambia opened their campaign with a commanding 4-1 victory over Tanzania on Monday as well. Elsewhere, South Africa made a statement of intent at the CAF Africa Cup of Nations Under-17 with a thrilling 4-3 victory over Egypt in their Group B opener on Monday night at Stade Labizuli in Casablanca. The results in the CAF Under-17 played on Monday are as follows: Burkina Faso 2, Cameroon 1, Zambia 4, Tanzania 1, and South Africa, of course, 4, Egypt 3.
And Sankule, I know that we do have some interesting matches lined up for today. Can you tell us more?
Yes, absolutely. We have some very interesting lineups, including a Senegambian derby. But before I come to that, in today's fixture in the CAF Under-17 Africa Cup of Nations, Mali will take on Angola in the opening game of Group D today at 17 GMT. Somalia and Tunisia will open their Group C campaign with a clash at Ben Mohammed Abid Al Stad Stadium on Tuesday, that is today at 1700 hours as well. And defending champion Senegal will begin the defense of their title against neighbors the Gambia in Group C class today at 1400 GMT. This is the first time between these two countries are meeting at this stage of CAF competition. Both teams have won the title previously. Senegal are the reigning champions, while the Gambia are 2 times champions, having won in 2005 at home and in 2009 in Algeria.
So you have the Scorpions against
the baby Scorpions, of course, against the young I didn't
say that.
No, but that's their nickname actually, the baby Scorpions.
Well, at the end of the day, it's going to be a good play.
Yes, we are expecting a very interesting game. You know, each time Senegal and the Gambia plays, it's always tense. Because you're talking about some will say when two brothers, meet in the football in a game of football. It's always interesting. So I'm really looking forward to watching a very interesting football. this afternoon.
Very well. For you out there, do stay tuned to WADR because we'll bring you all of these details. And that's how we wrap up this edition of Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mustafa Sek, Mam Kodufai, and Umo Daniego for the technical support. Do interact with us via social media platforms, X, Instagram at WADR English, on Facebook, WADR English Service, and stream live on wadr.org. I'm Abdullah Hassan. Good afternoon.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, New EMEA.